You're listening to the MindPod Network. Thank you to all of you that supported the podcast with your very generous donation. And of course, you can always support the podcast by using the Amazon portal to buy your stuff, or head on over to iTunes and leave this podcast a review or a rating. Thank you so much. It's all happening. 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 Welcome to the podcast, episode 112 of the It's All Happening with Zach Leary podcast. That's me, your host. Here we are, episode 112. And this week on the podcast, we have the amazing, inspirational, and luminous, magical Shayna Hiller, who's a wonderful yogini based out of Los Angeles. We'll talk more about Shayna in a minute. So episode 112 of the podcast, and we are moving full steam ahead into 2018. I think most people agree that 2017 was definitely a funky year. A lot of transition went on. You can't help but escape the political pedestal that has been created, the political theater that has been painted across the landscape of the American zeitgeist and the American consciousness, even though we look at it and realize how absurd it is, and it is very absurd, it's still a real thing. It does affect people's lives, and, and making sense of that and making peace of that, it's definitely been kind of tricky. So it's been 1 year since the administration has transitioned into this current one, and think of that what you will, draw your own conclusions, yes, but we're not going to derail the podcast into politics right now. I wanted to reflect on something else, on a human being, a person. His name was Sham Das, and he left his body 5 years ago today.
Even if you don't get it right, it still works. Meaning, the sage Valmiki, who wrote the amazing story of Ram, the Ramayana, in Sanskrit language, before he was this great rishi, sage, poet, Sanskritwala, he was a common thief, a highway robber, who would steal from the likes of us. So he accumulated a fair amount of illegal income until one day he came across a bunch of sages that were on pilgrimage and happened to pass by his toll, and he said, "Give me everything you got." They said, "We got only Ram. That's all we've got. We have no wealth, no credit card, no check, nothing. We carry nothing but the name of Hari. Take it. Take it freely from us. We will charge you no interest."
That's just a little taste of Sham Das, sort of riffing on his poetic wisdom and his poetic knowledge of his relationship with the divine in the form of satsang, and which is a gathering of people, like-minded people who are on the path together, sharing stories and kirtan and celebrating the divinity within all of us. And that's just, it was just a taste of Sham Das doing what he did like no other person could do. So the reason I played that is because 5 years ago today, Sham Das left his body. And the reason I wanted to talk about that is because when you were with Sham Das, you were with somebody who truly devoted their entire life to a devotional mood. This is a guy who went to India in the early 70s to find Neem Karoli Baba and take part in that experience, which he did. But simultaneously, he also fell in love with a very specific path of devotion for Krishna. And through that transformative experience, he became kind of an otherworldly figure who was right here on planet Earth with us. Needless, of course, he was a human being, and had everything that comes with that. But when you're around somebody who is in the practice of yoga 24/7, is in the practice of prayer 24/7, is in the practice of divinity and the mood of the divine 24/7, it's really an intoxicating thing, because you see it is not an act. It is not fashionable. It is not temporary. This is someone who can really just fall back into the arms of his beloved, which in and of itself is a very difficult practice to try to do. And when you're around somebody like that, you will never, ever forget it. So this week on the podcast, Shayna Hiller, who is an incredible yogini based out of Los Angeles, and who's a new friend of mine, who I've just gotten to know in depth pretty quickly and recently. But she is a fantastic, luminous, radiant human being who, and it's very appropriate that I played the Shamdas piece as well. Of course, Shayna is much younger than Shamdas was, but Shayna is really in this practice of yoga. Yes, she is a yoga and meditation teacher who gives public classes in LA and does teacher trainings and leads retreats. But when you're around her, you can feel the bhav and the energy and know that this is something she has devoted her life to. And again, when you're around someone like that, you really, really feel the ease in their being and the confidence in their being and the self-love and their ease of speech and breath and sight, and know that it is coming from a very, very sincere place. So I really enjoyed this podcast with Shayna. And if you're in LA and are looking for a great yoga teacher or meditation teacher or wellness coach or anything like that, look no further, ShaynaHiller.com. And she came to the kitchen table, and here's the podcast. Shayna Hiller, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
It's good to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Episode 112 of the It's All Happening podcast. So here we are. I'm so glad we got to do it in person. Here you are sitting at the kitchen table.
Kitchen table, dining room table.
So, since I've gotten to know you a little bit, and I've told you this off tape before, but the quality that I get from you is that yoga, wellness, whatever it is, like the actual method that you teach, that is almost circumstantial. To me, it feels like you are I don't know what the right word is, maybe like a purveyor of consciousness expansion and of wellness expansion and of encouraging people to course correct their lives and to pivot and to find their true beings. But if karma's played out differently, you could have just as easily done the same thing through being a college professor, a surf teacher, whatever it is,
Totally.
And it just happened to be that you found yoga and meditation and these things. So I just find that difference with what you do sort of more pronounced than other teachers. I don't know. But what is it that got you to make the transition from being just seeker, student, changing your own life into wanting to share it with others? Because that's where I think the key of it lies.
Yeah, wow, that's so good. I love, I feel like I want to write down everything you just said.
Well, you can listen to it.
That's true. I'm going to listen and jot it down, because it's like I sometimes try to formulate what it is in words. And I guess, to teach yoga and meditation is just the the umbrella under which I choose to share consciousness or presence or the teachings. In terms of the transition from practicing to teaching or from being a student seeker, honestly, I think I'm still a seeker, but the way that I learn is through teaching. And it wasn't necessarily a conscious choice. Honestly, it was just something that honestly, it was probably one of those like fallacies of my behavior or my persona that could potentially be detrimental to my being, that I just don't really think sometimes. I'm like, I just want to do that. I'm just going to teach. And
I'm the same way. I like it. No filter.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to do it. And so, but because of that, like, unwavering, like knowingness that I'm just going to step into teaching, I actually didn't even have time to think any further into the future or to have doubt, because it's just like, I'm just going to do this. And I didn't have a goal attached to it. And it's interesting because I do coach a lot of new yoga teachers, and they tend to have this like temporary paralysis in their growth because their vision is so big that it's overwhelming. And everyone's like, what's your vision? And I'm like, just be present. So
the vision can be so grand and just, I want to change the world, right?
Yeah. It's like, wait, hold on. That's like a lot. And it's sweet for the mind to have that big thing. But then how do we dial it down into a tangible, like right now, what do I do? And yeah, action is great. Having an intention is good, but you got to do something. The universe will support you. But yeah, I think I just wasn't really attached, but I wanted to, it was just kind of effortless and obvious.
So you just mentioned dialing it down and kind of distilling it down to its essence, right? And just being present. So if somebody comes to you and they're like, whatever the case may be, the circumstances doesn't matter if it's relationship, divorce, kids, eating disorders, addiction, that doesn't necessarily matter. But Shayna Hiller, my life's a mess. I need to find some kind of healing. I need to find some kind of peace. Where should I start?
Yeah. So this is interesting. That's like, it just goes back to what you just initiated this entire conversation with about, like, I could have been a surf teacher. I could have been a college professor. I could just teach yoga, and I still can. And we all can do whatever we want at any moment. It's important to know that. The answer to the question is always the same. And the way that the answer is conveyed changes based on the psychology of the person I'm talking with, because I believe that all suffering stems from like not accepting the present moment as it is to some degree. Right. That does not discount the fact that if somebody is dealing with an eating disorder, that they don't have to make changes, right? Or if somebody is, overweight, that they don't have to make changes in order to prevent disease down the line or to feel happier in their mind. But what I find is that it's impossible for anybody who feels like they're not well to get well if they don't first accept not being well. So there's this like, I'm really against what is. I really am judging what is as bad or wrong. And it's impossible to like create cohesion or to heal from the broken place. So it almost requires like a quantum leap of radical like faith and transformation of being into, oh, okay, like, here I am, and, here's what I'm going to create. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And that makes perfect sense. And I think the core of that, and I really feel this way because I have a strong association to the 12-step community.
Yep.
And that the origins of you becoming a member of any sort of 12-step community is because you cannot exist in the present moment without trying to alter that present moment, self-medicate that present moment in any capacity. You cannot just sit still and be comfortable with that present moment. You got to do something to take the pain away.
Yep.
Whether that pain is real, imaginary, self-styled, exaggerated, it doesn't really matter. It's just you cannot exist fully in that moment. Yeah. And yogic practices, I think, no matter what the method is, the essence of it is just being present, right? Being present with breath and movement and asana.
Totally. Right? And being present even with the challenges. I was on the phone with my teacher a few days ago. He's in India, and we were talking, and I love it because he speaks in metaphors only. And I like wish Yoda. That I had that. Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, he kind of looks like Yoda also. The long hair. And he's little and he's short. So he said, Shayna, I'm not even going to try the accent. I'm not even going to try. He said, if you're driving along the street, you're driving down the street and the street is open and there's no traffic and you're flowing and you're at a very reasonable, comfortable, pleasant pace. And all of a sudden there's a detour and you have to make an unexpected, very sharp turn. Once you make that turn, there happen to be more bumps in the road. The gravel is not as paved as it was on the prior street. And so you also have to place your foot on the brakes. You have to go over these bumps. There's this unexpected turn. And but in order to get to your destination, this is the way that you have to go, and you have to adjust the way that you're driving and operating this vehicle in order to get there. And it's like, so those unexpected twists and turns, those detours, the bumps, like the slowing down, you'd still have to be present during those. Otherwise, I'm going to just crash, like that's life. And so being present with breath or with asana or with, yoga is sometimes painted as this picture of like, just be present and it's all good. It's like, no, be present with all the crap. Yeah. And that doesn't mean pretend to like it. But if you could literally be the witness of all of it and not identify too much with it, I feel strongly that it will pass and change and shift and transmute and transform more quickly than if I'm against it or if I'm trying not to feel that, whatever that is. Right. And identification with an experience, a sensation as pain or pleasure or good or bad, that dichotomy and that duality is also what yoga is trying to get to the core of, so that there is an unbiased, unwavering santosha or a contentment with all, without differentiation.
Right. And then within that sort of comes equanimity, right? Like equanimity doesn't imply that the muck is non-existent.
No, it can't. Or the lotus can't live.
Right, exactly. Or the lotus can't live, right. But as a teacher, don't you find that so many people are trying to disassociate themselves from the muck and just be so, like I sort of find like yoga in the West, and you talk a lot about it on this podcast, but the paradigm of yoga in the West has sort of gotten into that habit of trying to disassociate from the suffering. Totally. And it's like, oh, it's all love, man. It's just drink my green juice and stay on the mat. It's all good.
If only that worked. Yeah.
Right. So I just, yes, but okay, if you're really in something that is incredibly painful and you're still just trying to engage in that practice, and I know for me, I don't know what it is lately, but definitely within the last couple of years, I've sort of started to not get in my practice when I've been in the pain. And I've been like,
I think that's smart.
It's become harder to do. So what's the key there of just staying?
Well, I think that's the reason I say I think that's smart, and you're probably like, huh? Because there's less of this motivation or something, or this discipline to, okay, I'm not, I should be practicing, right? If anything comes from that,
the should,
it's like this relatively manufactured effort to do something that we think is going to solve an issue. And even I've seen, especially in the West, especially here in LA, but yoga becomes the distraction, doing the practice, especially asana, because yoga has gotten so watered down that it's like, if try to sit with what is. I'm a big fan of like less technique that comes from anything other than your true being when it comes to handling challenging situations. So if there's this, I do like health coaching with people also, in addition to teaching yoga, and it's like health, life, nutrition. And people will be like, I know I should be doing this. And I was so good last week. And it's like the better we are, or the more we actually do the thing that we think we should do, the more chances, the more likely it is that it's going to go the other way. And it's just the mind's way of trying to, compensate or go to the extreme or try to. I think that if there's effort, even in meditation, I think that too much effort, it's just like we have to relax the effort and realize that everything that we want is right here.
It's a very American thing, like, okay, just like the effort, like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to crush this.
Yeah. We're killing it. I'm like, whoa, okay, I don't want to be doing that. Yeah.
I'm going to just crush the fuck out of this meditation, man. Yeah, I'm going to sit like the Buddha for 2 hours, man. Right.
I know. I used to want to do like a skit, of two people sitting and like all of a sudden, oh my God, I'm enlightened. Yeah. Like a big dance. Like, I won. Yeah, that's what's happening. It's this competition. It's a competitive nature of human beings and the mind. And there's nothing wrong with it.
A little bit of it.
A little bit of it. Definitely. Yeah. If we're missing the point, if it's causing suffering, if it's like, yeah, sure, you can be crushing it. And then what's happening when you're on your own? Like, how's your mind and your being? But,
right.
It's like, because the mind is an incredible tool, and we do learn in numbers and structure, and it's a sweet way to like orient ourselves in this physical reality that we live in. But if we utilize that at the discount of our essence or of the moment or of really tuning in to something beyond just logic, I think that we're bound for suffering to some extent.
And there is like getting somewhere in your yoga practice to where you're at the level of where you can, complicated asanas are starting to come a little bit easier and you're actually getting through them. And that's a pretty cool thing to
it
get
is.
to. And it feels
it's amazing.
Pretty good. Right. But as a means to an end, I mean, you just said it, and then it just kind of becomes a cyclical, like.
Totally, and we get lost in it, and that's why it's like it's a tool that we can use, especially asana. Yep. For me, at least, it was a tool that I used. I still use it in a much different way. It's a much more playful and lighthearted and fun. I used to use it in a much more like deprivation-based, like aggressive way, but in a very subconscious, subtle way. It taught me that I am not my body and that my body is not the same for any two given moments. And so I do think that like a physical practice is amazing to relate to the body, but it's still, like I said, can be used as a distraction. It's all about balance, as cliche as it is.
Did you start off with asana? Was that your first?
Yes.
And so you grew up in New Jersey, and take me through that. Take us through that. You grew up
That's in New pretty Jersey. Much all you got to say. I'm Jersey girl.
How's the Jersey girl end up doing asana in the jungles of Costa Rica? Yeah,
great question. I was very much a Jersey girl.
Bruce Springsteen.
Before my time. But yes, that's what everyone says. So because of that, yes. Jersey Shore, that's like more my jam. Was not aware that I was inhabiting a body for my whole entire life, was not interested in anything to do with holistic well-being. I didn't even know what that was. In fact, my mom's father, who I never got a chance to meet, was an organic farmer. And I didn't even know that. So who knows, like energetically, there's something down the line. But I went to college in Rhode Island. And when I was studying there, I just really wasn't happy. There was just something that I would do I was a big follower. I did everything that everybody else did. So I drank a lot. I, was just constantly out partying and just the whole thing that people do in college. But in my being, there was just, I don't even know what, and I just wanted to get away. So I studied abroad in Australia during my third year of college. And when I was there, I accidentally stumbled into a yoga class. I thought it was going to be kickboxing, and it was yoga. And I was like, oh crap, what is this going to be? And it was like my mind was blown. From that day on, I stopped drinking. I did start like, using a lot of marijuana because and it's interesting because before that I had never, and I feel like it like expanded my mind though, like especially when I was all the way across the world, you know, I became a loner. I traveled a lot. I went to Byron Bay, which is magical. And I was like, who the fuck am I? But then it cascaded into this like tumultuous, like eating disorder, first of all, because we can like, it's like that control factor of like, who am I was like expressing itself through the way. Cause like, what can we control in this world? I was kind of scared because I felt like I was dying. I'm like, wait, hold on. That old Shayna doesn't really want to do that anymore. It's like slipping away from me. And like, what can I actually grasp onto? So when I got back from Australia, I found a yoga class in Rhode Island because I was still in college. And I went up to my teacher one day and I said, I love this. She was amazing. She was just so well studied, such a senior teacher, hilarious. And I said, where can I go to learn more? And she just looked at me and she just said, if you have the time and if you can afford the time away, go to Nosara, Costa Rica and study with Don and Amba Stapleton, former Kripalu director of Kripalu in the Berkshires. And so I said, okay. And that night I booked it. And that goes back to the first, question that you asked about like, when was that like that moment that you from student to teacher? And I was just like, okay. And I just did it. And it's like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Sure. And it's like when the student is ready, the student will become a teacher, but the student also stays a student. So I just needed to deepen my practice and I just needed to learn. And I went to Costa Rica, did my training, and same thing. I just really loved it and I wanted to stay longer. So little by little, year after year, I like tacked on a few more months each year and just...
And it went on for years.
It went on for years. It went on for 5 years. And I got really steeped into yogic philosophy and meditation and chanting in the beginning. Kirtan was a really big piece of my yoga journey. And I felt like, especially since I was also eating only raw food at the time and like mainly fruit, the hot jungle was supporting my body because I felt like the sun was nourishing me and I could actually sustain myself there. Otherwise, I was like freezing and stressed out by all of the stimulation. So it was like a very monk-like existence. I didn't go out with people. I went to sleep at 8 o'clock every night, up to meditate at 6 a.m. Yeah. And it was just like that. And I felt like I was doing it right.
It was pretty regulated.
Very regulated, right. AKA jail of the mind.
But in that paradigm, I guess the metaphor or the practice of a relationship with control, right? Like, where does that take you? Because I feel that when you go from one end of the extreme, like you're in college and you're out partying and doing what it is that, we do, and then you're all of a sudden in this extreme where the variables and the external factors are pretty regulated and controlled. You're eating a certain amount of or a certain kind of food and going to bed with the sun and up with the sunrise. It becomes very, that
regimented.
You're regimented and you really feel like you're in control.
Yeah. That feeling is like a high. Right. It's a high, It's still
but are you in control?
Not at all. In fact, the more that I mistaken that, the further disconnected I was from source and from truth and from my authentic self. And the more suffering I endured as a result of it. But I was just so identified with it's fear, and my mind. It's just, it's an illusion. The control is an illusion that... this is the interesting piece though, is because I was studying yoga in depth and the science of the mind. This is the time in my life when I read all the books, Sure. I read all the books and I was reading all the books every single day and every single night. So the interesting piece of this, which is what I'm really fascinated about, is that I was consciously aware that the control was an illusion. My intellect was aware that none of this was real. And at the same time, I couldn't find a way out. I was still stuck. And I'm like, I know what to be doing. And I had I had gone to school for holistic nutrition. I had done my yoga training. And at the same time, it's almost as if I was playing this very like morbid game with myself, with my body. Like, let's just see how far I can push this before something crumbles or before, I actually need to make make a change. And it was also a way of staying small, because when I was sick or when I had an eating disorder, it's like I just felt like, well, I don't have to take responsibility for my life because I have a problem, and until my problem is done, I can just kind of be lazy.
Yeah.
You know?
And blame the problem.
Blame the problem. Exactly. Right. And I can't, or it's hard, but with the I can't break free of this, there's something that I feel, this is part of why I celebrate suffering, or I celebrate whatever we could perhaps perceive as suffering, because looking back, because I'm free of this. I am free of the eating disorder. There are many people who go to rehab for eating disorders, and they'll say, you know, if you've had an eating disorder, it's always in you, and that same little voice is going to come up, and you just have to make friends with that voice, or you have to choose your higher voice or your higher self. I'm clear of this issue. There's no residue whatsoever.
Really?
It's as if I had been reborn and it was a past life that I can clearly remember. And this is why I speak about it openly, because I feel like it's not denial. It's not like it wasn't me. I'm very aware that I was still embodied in this body, even though it looks very different now. But there's some compassion there for whatever that wave was, because like truly when I was in the midst of it, even though my mind knew better, like, okay, like you're killing yourself. Like what the heck's going on here? Like, come on, just eat this, or just don't do that. Or, you know, it's like, we all know. We all know. No one needs to learn what is good for them and what's not good for them. That is intrinsic to our being. It's something, I think, more or less, to like an extent.
Well, yeah, I think so. Not to interrupt the flow, but I do feel like it's... Yeah, I think you do intrinsically know what is good for you and what isn't good for you, but it can get to be a very sort of complicated state of delusion, playing with the idea of what isn't good for you, because you think, I know it's not good for me, but I'll be able to get rid of it sometime soon.
Oh, totally.
I'm just playing with this right now.
Totally. Well, the mind does all of its interesting, clever ways. And that's exactly what was happening to me.
Right.
And that whole thing that happens, when I look back at it now, had to be as it was. It was like a wave that was divinely timed, that whatever my excuses in my mind were, or my feelings of helplessness, like whatever I gave it, whatever energy I gave it, I still could not break free until the moment I did. And so then it's like, aha, like it kind of needed to work itself out. That being said, if I didn't have support, if I didn't have my education in yoga and holistic studies, who knows? Maybe it would have lasted longer. But I think that we're all on our own journey, and we need support from each other to continuously remind us that it's all temporary. You know?
It is all temporary, but it is. But that is sort of I mean, not to generalize it too much, but the condition of maybe an eating disorder or any kind of self-harm, addictive sort of behavior. You know, most people don't get into the framework of being able to completely disassociate it from it, in the sense that like for me with substance abuse recovery, I don't feel like, I know it's still in there somewhere. Yeah. And it's I mean, it's not active right now, but I do feel like it's in there somewhere.
Exactly. And that's the truth.
But that's also partly because it might be different than an eating disorder, in the sense that, and you know, I freely admit it. It's because, well, I like to get high. Yeah. You know, I don't know like what goes on in eating disorders, but like bulimia or anorexia, like that's me not necessarily so pleasant. Yeah.
I think it's different depending on how you take it out. Like that's the thing. It's like the like food. I used to actually always tell myself, I'm like, well, I'm glad it's not alcohol or drugs. Even though food is a drug, right? And it can definitely contribute. I mean, we can't live without it. And we, you know, and on the other end, you know, there's also like binge eating, and that's very detrimental to your health. But, you know, qualitatively speaking, in terms of the implications of health, I think a lot of it stems maybe at the root from this control thing or not wanting to be with things as they are, the present moment.
Yes.
But yes, of course. I mean, I think that when it comes to alcohol and drugs, it's a much different, it's a much different animal that we're talking about in terms of, because it does change your biology. It can. That being said, I'm very much into like not being aware that maybe it can be different, or maybe I'm not always this, maybe because it really boils down to who am I and what's the story behind it, and am I always going to be repeating the same story? And like, who am I now?
Who am?
That's the name of your book. Oh my God, that's so interesting. That just went full circle. Yeah. Who am I now? Who am I now?
Who are you now? Right.
But that is it.
And the story of where that book title came from, it came to me from Ram Dass. How old was I? I was 22 years old, and I took ketamine, and I went inside of an isolation tank. And right outside of the tank, my dad and Ram Dass were sitting right outside of the tank, and they didn't know I was in the tank. It was kind of one of those things, and they had kind of two chairs about 5 feet away from the tank, and they didn't know I was in it, and I didn't know they were outside of it. And I got to this K-hole sort of in the tank. It was starting to get very, very
intense.
Very intense, but very sort of like a disassociative, Anyway, I popped out of the tank, and then we were all kind of just staring at each other, just like, oh my God, and like this pregnant pause that seemed to go on forever. And Ram Dass just leaned into me and said, "Who are you now?"
Ooh, I just got chills.
Right. Really intense. And I brought this back to him. The reason I'm telling the story again is because I brought it back to him since, this was 25 years ago, 23 years ago. And I've talked to him about it before, and it's very much like what we're talking about here. It's, that using that sort of that pedestal or that mirror or just sort of that statement of existence.
Totally.
You can do it over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
And constantly. It's never too late to reinvent.
Completely, right? Every moment.
It's never too late to reinvent. And I find, and I notice that the older we get and kind of look around, I find, and myself included, I'm not just looking at others, but I do notice that I hear from a lot of people that, oh, it's too late, I'm stuck. Oh, it's too late, I'm stuck.
Totally.
And I don't think that's true.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And it's important to be aware of what we say, because to the extent that we identify with those beliefs is the extent to which they are true. And so it will be too late, and you will be stuck if you believe that. And it's not about, not having those thoughts. I think that that's deeply conditioned and ingrained into our culture and society. I mean, the media is, constantly kind of drilling that into us. Like, oh, come on. Like, like before it's too late, do it all now. It's like more is better. Avoid getting old, like all of these things.
And it's so deeply reinforced.
So deeply that it's like how we just are. So, it's very, it's radical. It's a big deal to be present. It's not just this little Buddha sitting in a field or underneath a Bodhi tree, like all zenned out. Maybe back then it was, before we were inundated with this deep conditioning,
Well, I think about that a lot. And of course, context is everything. And, the frame of mind and someone the Buddha's a long time ago, but just say the 16th, 17th century or whatever. And, your perception of what reality is was just all you knew. So, maybe you felt life was just as intense as we do now. But I don't think so.
Yeah.
I really don't think so.
I don't either.
Yeah. And fuck, man, I think it is, being able to stay present for any extended period of time now, it's a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a miracle.
Yeah.
I mean, meditation for me and, my 20 to 40 minutes a day of meditation, it's like, if you get 3 to 5 minutes of extended, then it's like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah. And that's what I tell all my yoga students all the time. It's like, when you're doing all this stuff on the mat, like it's even samadhi, if you call bliss or samadhi or enlightenment, like it's not about like, that is it forever. It's like the glimpse. If you catch a glimpse, you're lucky. And then you collect, as you go on in your journey, little nuggets, little glimpses. You put them in that little pocket, and they add up over time. And that's why I like trusting the journey and trusting the process and not being too, not having too many expectations and not trying too hard. Just have a glimpse and go back to the other, and then have another glimpse and go back to the other. It's like not a big deal.
So, right. That's a great way to put it. So, these years later, when you look back on that old Shayna that you've sort of shed, what's your relationship? I mean, how do you look at it? What's your relationship with that old Shayna? Like, how do you look at like the Shayna that was in the peak of her eating disorder and really suffering? What, now that so many years have gone by and now that you're teaching, what was at the core of it now, if you're able to look back on it?
Sometimes it's just, I think it's like it was definitely lack of self-love. I did a lot of workshops that try to kind of pinpoint the root of these types of issues, which there is that general consensus, like something happened when you were 6. And I remember I did landmark education. I did that with my mom. I know, it's so funny. And then like at one point they were telling us, that something happened when we were young. I looked at her, I'm like, Mom, what happened? Did you like abuse me? Cause I don't remember. I think everything was good. She's like, no, I think maybe Daddy cursed at you once, but I don't think so. So I had and I'm so grateful and blessed, but I had amazing upbringing. But I think that being unconscious is traumatic, and in my adolescent years and being like a follower and kind of just doing whatever, like I did not care for my body. So like I was overly sexual with people, like overly so, without regard for my own desires or boundaries to any extent. So I kind of went, to the extreme, too far. And thought that I was enjoying it, but it was always, under the influence of something, so it was never conscious whatsoever. And it was really not pleasant. So I think that in a subconscious way, I'm like, no, this is my body. And I was completely celibate, mind you, during the entire eating disorder and all those years. So it was like this reclaiming, and at the same time, sadly, harming, but my body, but in a different way. It's almost as if it was like self-punishment. I was punishing myself for being in my body in the wrong way. So you went the other way. So I went the other way, which it's like, oh my God, that's like so sad. I feel sad. And I also feel grateful because it's like, because I got so thin, I had like orthorexia/anorexia. The orthorexia is like an obsession with being pure and clean. That's why I meditated for 2 hours a day. I did a sun gazing in Costa Rica. I did all my pranayama. I had all these rituals, like a lot of what I've learned, believe it or not, in yoga and through nutrition, I took to the extreme. So I would chew every bite of food 50 times. And I would just do all these very specific rituals that I had no time for anything else. It was like everything was like sprouted, and like I had to cut my food in a certain way and sit with it before I ate it. It was like a whole thing. It was very exhausting. And it's like I was just stuck in it. But so that led me to being very, 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 very thin, very, very low body weight. I was almost not even there. I was taking up very little space on the planet. And so when I consciously decided to build myself up again with a better mind, a healthy mind, and healthier foods, I literally felt like I'm rebirthing myself, because it was going from nothing to something new. So again, in that sense, like energetically, it felt like, wow, like I really needed to go through this shedding process in order to come back. And then of course we can look at it through the lens of like, wow, I was really punishing myself for not being present, for neglecting my body. And here I am, like, really, is that the way to do it? So at the end of the day, and at the beginning of the day and in the middle of the day, it comes down to self-love, no matter what. I used to only do like nutritional coaching with people, and there's something to that, but at the root of it, it's like when there are those imbalances, it's really about self-love. Which self are we loving though?
Yeah.
Exactly. We can get into that too, but
yeah, which self are we loving? But even at the core of self-love. I mean,
Self-acceptance.
Yeah, that's maybe a different word because, well, what's at the core of you not loving yourself in the first place? I mean,
yeah.
So, okay.
It's deep.
Yeah, it's very deep. So you went on for, some years with this and the celibacy thing, that went on for a while, right?
Yeah. Almost 10 years.
Jeez, that's a long time.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, considering you're not that old, that's a huge part of your adult life.
Yeah.
So getting back into, and not just the sexuality, but the food and all of this, and just kind of reintegrating.
Yeah.
I said the right word.
Yeah,
Back
totally. That's it.
Into this, but what was that like? Was it?
It's like a fun game.
Yeah.
It's like a fun, amazing game that I get to indulge consciously in all of it, literally. Because I must say that when I was at the height of my eating disorder and there was like nothing, because of meditation and yoga, like there was still like this little spark of like eternal bliss. I must say that even though my mind was suffering, there was like peace.
Oh yeah.
So
I get that completely. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's possible. It's the essence.
Yeah.
I just feel that and know that strongly. So to step back into life, material existence.
I mean, the material world is here.
It is here, and I am embodying it, and I'm choosing it every single moment and every single day consciously. And so it's been so fun. I love it. That's a part of why I feel the freedom that I feel around food, around my body. I don't think as much. I'm not thinking about the future as much. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not anxious anymore. Like all those chains have been cut and they've been unlocked. So I also started learning about Tantra, which is like the other side of the coin of yoga, which is really, so Osho says that yoga is deprivation with awareness and Tantra is indulgence with awareness. And so I can see myself shifting from the masculine to the feminine, or from yoga to Tantra. I still do yoga, but I live in a very yogic way. I still have many rituals. I meditate, and there's a different flavor to it. In fact, there's flavor. It's not bland anymore.
Right. Yes.
This is a gift to be embodied in this human existence. Like don't take it so extreme that you are self-medicating and numbing those deep inner like emotions. Because I believe that underneath the layer of sadness or pain or suffering or whatever you want to call it is that pool of bliss, just like the lotus and the mud. So just like enjoy this glorious, delightful existence that we have, without getting too tangled into it and forgetting that it's not real and it's temporary. It's real, but it's not temporary. It's temporary. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you could dance around like what's real and what isn't.
Yeah.
For forever.
Forever.
Yeah. And I like to play with the idea as much as anyone, and especially through the lens of psychedelia.
Of course.
You can really bend that paradigm and make it into this completely elastic, oh my God, what is consciousness? Is it this disembodied? You can play with it forever and ever. And what's real and what isn't. But, you can sometimes take it too far because in one sense, yes, it is all temporary, but the pain that is happening, the suffering, the sadness, as well as the bliss, but that all is real.
Yep.
Because this is our existence.
You're so right.
Now.
Totally. I feel like a lot of people actually use that. None of it's real. I mean, in this world, as like spiritual bypassing, right?
It's just the Maya. Man.
It's just the Maya, it's an illusion. And you're right. And it's not good to just say it lightly like that. I think that it is temporary, and going back to what you said, that you can reinvent, the moment or yourself, or you can just pivot, like you said earlier, and choose a different direction. It's important to just not get caught up. And it's so hard, it's difficult, and it's important to be gentle with ourselves.
It is important to be gentle. And Sham Das actually once corrected me on something about the Maya, I said something, well, it's just the Maya, this isn't real anyway. And he was like, no, this is real. What the Maya is your false attachment to that.
Yes, correct. Exactly. Exactly. Because it's
thinking
Israel.
that you need that in order to make yourself happy.
Beautiful.
Like
yes.
That's the Maya.
Oh, Shamdas.
Yeah. Sweet guy.
Yes.
Hey, Mark Claire.
I saw him on the bed.
Yeah.
Those were his paws coming down the stairs. That's very important for the podcast. They should know there's a cat coming down the stairs.
He's done this a lot.
He knows. He's like, it's my turn now.
Yeah, but that is a very, because and again, like we were talking about life in the modern world in 2018, I just feel that there are so many aspects of the material world that are rearing its ugly head like all the time.
Yeah.
Which ones do we play with? Which ones do we separate from? Which ones do we allow it to affect our lives?
Totally. You're onto something though. You're onto something with the connection between spirituality and technology. For some reason, I just got like a strong hit, like because of what's happening right now and the whole what's real and what's not. I mean, there are some days when forget social media and like everyone being able to respond. Like I really think back to AOL. I think back to dial-up internet and sitting in my parents' basement and like I was like, oh my goodness, an instant message. This is amazing. This is like the way of the future. Like it's just, how is that even possible? And mind you, this is on like a desktop computer that's like 5,000 tons, that weighs so much. And it's like, this is really proof. I think that technology and spirituality are almost like one and the same in a way. It's like this, it's energy. It's very interesting.
It's energy and it's also connection.
Yes.
Think about like the internet, or you can use whatever paradigm you want, social and technology, but to say the internet and social media, right? At its essence, it's just, forget all the distractions, but at its essence is connection.
It's connection. Yeah. And it's like
it's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing, or it's an ugly thing, depending on how you use it.
Either way, but that's just like spirituality and religion.
And being a human. It's like you can kill or you can love. What are you going to do with this life?
And you can choose to, leave a Christ-like consciousness and be in his footsteps and lead that kind of life, or you can use it to condemn an eye for an eye and think that you're superior, So there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
It is an amazing thing to be able to send an instant message, an SMS to, a Rwandan child in the middle of nowhere.
That's crazy.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And the implications of that are also deeply, deeply earth-shattering, because up until not that long ago, our perception, our relationship with what went on in the other parts of the world was like, if something was going on in Iraq in the year 1900, it might as well have been Mars.
Exactly.
You just didn't even
consider it. Like, what is, yes.
It took months to get there.
Yes.
These people lead completely different. I mean, you didn't even think about it, but now the world's
That's a great perspective.
So
it is smaller.
Very much.
It's crazy.
Yeah, very, very, very much. So, you're kind of using your story here as the thread. And the reintegration thing, though, I just find, I figure you're still going through some.
Absolutely. You're so intuitive. We've already nailed that one down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still happening.
But when you work with students on like transformation and I don't even think we even really answered the question, which was one of the first questions. When somebody comes to you and they're in, in just sort of whatever pain that they're in, doesn't necessarily matter. Where do they start?
Where do they start? I mean, gosh, it depends on what they want. So I said earlier about like what I say to people is basically. I'm saying the same thing in different words based on what they hear, what they can understand. So a lot of it has to do with discovering a purpose or something that inspires them. A lot of people are unhappy because they're living on relative autopilot or automatic, or there's something deep in them that they don't know how to express, or they're scared to express, or they just need that type of support and listening in order to bring it to the surface and flush it out. And so I'm about getting people into something that inspires their creativity. Because I find that when we're in a mode of creativity, we're not thinking about the past or the future, and we are present. And it's this alignment with source. It's this alignment with like existence, you know, that doesn't mean you got to quit your job. Doesn't mean you got to like, you know, leave your relationship. I mean, of course there's enough red flags. If you're conscious enough, yeah, it's time to leave, you know, if you're getting sick. But if you're just on autopilot and you've been neglecting the other facets of your being that are more playful or heart-centered or creative, then weaving pleasure into the life, I think is, that's the basis of my teachings is pleasure is a part of health. That does not discount structure. That does not discount discipline. I mean, discipline is so potent. Discipline. I mean, that's where the word disciple comes from.
Yes.
It's like, I am devoted to my well-being. And at the same time, I'm going to go about it in a way that's not from a place of self-hatred.
Yes.
I'm moving from a place of desire and non-extremes. And it's really a sweet line. And I actually feel that the people who come to me usually have tried many different things that don't work. They've gone the very, very structured path of like, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this every day, 5 times a day, like the real regimented way of like getting back to balance. And then it's like, oh my God, I'm still like binging, or I'm still like going the other extreme, or so balance.
So there's something that, in this issue, I always have a very hard time when people come to me and ask me for stuff as well. It's how do you, and you said something really interesting about injecting playfulness into, and I would even add into the mundane.
Totally.
Because you have to, right? So a person comes to you, they're working some kind of office job that is, you know, making them sick emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's extremely toxic. People at the work environment are abusive, and it's just a terrible, shitty existence. Mm-hmm. But they have 2 kids and a mortgage, and you can't just walk away. Yep. You've got to work it out somehow.
Yep.
So what do you do there?
Well, I never go to walking away, because I don't think there's that John Kabat-Zinn quote. It's like, wherever you go, there you are. And the suffering is usually, you know, it's like the suffering is usually like not because of the job and even because of the yucky people and energy. I think it's like, because you can be a light in a dark room. I think that, you know, there's this capacity to not be as affected. Now, this is like, it's a journey though. That's the thing, is like, it wouldn't just be one conversation that's like, here, now do this and it'll be fine. You can assure somebody that it'll be fine. They don't have to make any drastic changes, but I think that step by step is the way. And if that person were to, I don't know, spend more time in nature, or take a yoga class earlier in the morning, or make love with his wife or partner every single day before going to work, there's going to be a much different quality of energy that he or she brings to his or her work. And making sure that when you're not at work, that your mind is not there, and that you're devoting your time to your family and things that you really do love. Now, people have to want it. People tend to enjoy complaining. Like, for that person, there may come a time, if he or she starts taking care of him or herself more, that she realizes, or he realizes, oh my gosh, like, I'm spending 1/3 of my life doing something I hate, the other 1/3 of my life sleeping, and then what the hell is left? So it's like, very little. Yeah. It's teeny slice. So change something. Now, and yes, I get it. The money piece, you have kids. That's something that I don't even have the authority to say, because each person has to, come to their own level of trust. Right. in the universe and be realistic. I'm not saying like there are some people out there who are like, I just trust the universe. I'm letting it all go and we're just going to see what happens. Like, no, be practical and keep a little bit of space open for magic.
Yes. And piece by piece. I mean, I forget what you said before, but yeah, it's a gradual.
Yes.
It's gradual.
Step by step. It has to be. It has to be. But that's, career, in my nutrition training or my holistic studies training, it was not just about food. And it's that there are so many different factors. It's pretty obvious, but when we break it down, it makes a lot of sense that contribute to our even physical and obviously mental well-being. And that's obviously what we eat, our relationships, whether intimate or professional or just regular friendships, our physical activity, spiritual practice, and career. And I have seen many clients who want to lose weight, and I look at their diet and I'm like, you're eating well, you're actually eating amazing. And then we go into whatever else is happening in their life. I have seen people who do alter their work or they add in something that's creative on the side and they lose physical weight. It's not what we think it is, So it's just all connected.
But the not walking away part, that's on a case-by-case basis.
It's on a case-by-case, but I have to say that generally, don't walk away.
But if you're in an abusive relationship.
Oh, yes. If it's literally obviously it's bad for your health. And it's not, that would be silly to stay in it.
Right.
But something that's a little bit uncomfortable. This is like yoga, that's what I say. It's if it's painful, why the heck are you doing it? If it's a little bit challenging, can you breathe through it? And can we shift our relationship to the present moment? And again, it's person by person. I wish, because I'd probably be a lot more successful if I could, be like the mainstream, doctors or even nutritionist people out there who's like, yeah, just do this. Just follow my prescription and you'll be fine. And it's like that one size fits all approach to well-being. And I can't out of my conscience do that. It's like, let me just sit with you. Who are you? And let's figure that out. Of course, there's generalizations that work for everybody. Drink water, and go in nature.
Yeah. And I think anybody can sit for 10 minutes a day.
Absolutely. Anyone can, even if you think you can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Sit and do nothing.
Sit and do nothing. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Try it. That's some of the most challenging things that exist, but
wow,
the most effective.
So in your, the world of Shayna Hiller, what's coming up that people should know about?
Oh,
Bali like a boss. I just wanted to say it once.
That's beautiful. Thanks for saying it. My friend Leah came up with the title. Do you know Leah? I think you do. A little bit. You know of her. Yeah. Meditation teacher. Yeah. I'm doing a retreat called Bali Like a Boss. It's for creative people who do want to get more steeped in their vision or that get that energy flowing. It is a yoga and meditation retreat. All of my retreats are yoga and meditation retreats. With a flavor or with a theme or a title to just further inspire it, but it's usually the same. And other than that, my yoga teacher training in Bali, I'm kind of co-teaching with my teacher from India. That's going to be amazing. And I don't know where the universe will take me this year. I have many opportunities to go to India and Thailand. And I also really love being in LA. So I do teach public classes all over LA. So that's, where I like being the most these days.
Shayna, thank you for coming.
My pleasure, Zach. Thank you for having me.